Okay, anyway, thank you so much, Leha, and let's get into the meditation. Okay, everyone, so as always, just start out the meditation just by relaxing and finding that ease, especially in the beginning, the ease of the body. And it may take some time for the body to settle down after a long week or a long day or whatever. But take time to make sure you feel really relaxed and at ease. You really let go of the past and all the burdens over the last few days. Meditation is largely a matter of just waiting and allowing things to be, allowing things to settle down. It is not you that settle things down, it is you who allow things to just become easy and natural. So it's more about getting out of the way than actually doing anything. So just sit back as if you are relaxing after a long day's work in your favorite armchair or whatever. You're just relaxing, allowing the world to flow by. And as you allow it to flow by without interfering, without acting, you start to become peaceful. And as you wait in the present moment, just patiently being aware of whatever is happening, it is as if the world and your past and your life fades away into the background, and you gradually emerge into the present moment. And as you do that, just feel the delight of being mindful, of being aware, of feeling the positive energy in a place like the Dhammaloka Buddhist Center. And what a wonderful thing that is. Start to really enjoy the meditation practice. And as you let everything be, see if you can find that state of flow where you're just flowing along with phenomena, not interacting with them, but standing apart, standing at a distance, and just seeing things flowing along. It is as if you are observing the world, observing everything, without any kind of emotional involvement. That is already a beautiful state of mind. and just enjoy the peace, and also, if you can, try to imbue that peace with a sense of spiritual uplift, positive feelings, just by reminding yourself what a wonderful thing it is to be part of the spiritual tradition, to be part of this community right here. And sometimes just focusing on the little positive things like that give you an additional emotional boost, which enhances the quality of your mindfulness and also the peace that you experience. And we're now coming close to the end of the meditation. Before we come to the end, I would recommend just to take a few moments just to ask yourself what has happened over the last half an hour or so. And if you feel more peaceful and at ease, ask yourself why that is. Try to investigate your meditation just for a few moments. And I will now ring the bell 3 times, and on the 3rd time of the ringing of the bell, please come out of your meditation.